Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. My name is Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Yes, so the intro music is different today. Basically what happened is I have a really old version of Ableton Live, which is what I've used to record things for, the last 5-6 years now. I'm super used to it. For whatever reason, the version I have, I think, is no longer supported. So right as I was going to do my show tonight, I realized, oh shit, I can't even use Ableton anymore. So I had to download the sort of new version of it. It's going to take me a while to get the show back to where I want it audio production wise. It may sound a little bit different, but just bear with me. It'll probably take me a week or two to really sort of get my sea legs with Ableton 9 and soon to be Ableton 10. In any event, I've been away for a bit as well, so it's a lot of big changes going on. I was down in Florida for the week, didn't really have my audio equipment, so I decided just to take a break. And of course, I take a break during probably the biggest box office story, I think, since I've started doing this show, but probably one of the biggest box office stories since I started following the box office about 20 years ago, and that was the massive, huge flop of Justice League. And as much as I have read about it and talked about it online with people, it is such a huge event that I'm actually going to do an entire separate episode for Justice League this week. I'm going to do a Justice League Postmortem. It might take the place of my preview show, so I'll probably do it sometimes in the middle of the week. Also because it's going to be pretty quiet until the new Star Wars comes out in, I think, 2 weeks. Yeah, about 2 weeks. Anyway, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a little bit about Justice League, but we're going to talk about the weekend at large, the weekend of November 24th through the 26th, Thanksgiving weekend. We'll focus on the 3-day totals that came in today for the weekend, and I might mention a few things about the 5-day holiday totals, which, depending on how you view the box office, are just as important. But I like to focus on the 3-day totals just because I can extrapolate more on how I think they're going to do in the long run based on their 3-day total. In any event, let's get started. So number one this weekend, Thanksgiving holiday weekend, was Coco, to no one's real surprise, I think. Came in at $49 million for its 3-day total. 5-day total so far is $71 million, which is very, very impressive. I believe it's the fourth biggest Thanksgiving opener ever is that for Pixar, I guess? I can't even tell. Deadline says Pixar's Coco is the fourth best debut at the domestic box office over the Thanksgiving stretch, after Disney's Frozen, Moana, and Toy Story 2. It comes in right after those. Coco is basically tracking for about $65 million for the 5-day, went about $6 million more than that. So a really good performance overall. And you can tell why, right? Cinema score was an A+ overall. That's not just one demo gave an A+. A+ overall for Coco. Very rare score. You only get maybe a handful a year. Wonder got an A+, and also Hidden Figures got an A+ this year. So that bodes very well for its legs. Critics loved the film, 96% Rotten Tomatoes with 157 reviews. Average ranking was 8.1 out of 10. Very, very high. Even more impressive to me, and this falls in line with the cinema score of an A+, audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for Coco was 97% right now. And that's with almost 12,000 user ratings. So just a massive, massive home run here for Disney's Pixar. They had some quality problems. The Good Dinosaur, I think, was one of those films where it felt like they really got off track. But Coco, from the start, I think, even when I first saw the trailer, I was like, this looks pretty freaking good. And they really delivered this time. And so it's already at 71 for the 5-day. The question is, where's Coco going to go? Right. So the marketing was fantastic for this. They've really got audiences out there on the opening weekend. And one thing to note about the demographics, obviously it takes place in Mexico, and it is sort of based on or set around the Mexican holiday of Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, if I'm right, which I think is the day after. I should know this. I don't know why. I took Spanish for freaking until I was a sophomore in college. I think, and we always had, especially in grade school learning Spanish, we always had like a Dia de los Muertos like party. But anyway, it's set in Mexico, part of a Mexican holiday. So obviously the Latino audiences in America would show up for it, and that's what happened, right? About 36% of all ticket buyers for Coco in the United States were Latino. They call it Hispanic. I think Latino is the more appropriate term these days. That's a whole nother, I'm not gonna get down that path. Anyways, 36% of all ticket buyers were Latinos. 43% were Caucasian white, 8% were African American, and 8% were Asian. So if you can compare that 36% Latino audience to the U.S. population, it's significantly higher than that take. So there definitely was a pop off here with the Latino audiences in this movie. I think so. We got really good quality. People are loving this film, both critics and audiences. It's at 71 right now. What the hell is this thing gonna do? If we take the 3-day total and just think animation films, children's films, always, if they're decent, you usually go well over 3x. So let's just throw out 3x right now as the bottom for Coco with that $49 million 3-day total. 147. It's already halfway there, essentially. I think it's going to go much higher than that. I'm going to say, let's look at 4x total. You're looking at 196. I think it's going to be somewhere in between there, right? I think let's look at a 3.5x multiplier for Coco, 171. I think it's going to be closer to that. I'm going to guess probably like 175, 180. I think its multiplier is going to be fantastic. Just because the word of mouth is so good. And it's clearly another home run from Pixar and Disney. I mean, they knocked this one out of the park. And people showed up for it. I think it's one thing if a movie's really good, but I think the marketing on this was so well done. I'm not a huge children's, well, actually that's not true. I do like a lot of these films. But I'm not the audience, right? And so when I see a trailer for this stuff, I'm like, whatever. But when I saw the trailer for Coco, I was like, this one feels special. This one feels like they put that extra sort of detailed touch to the story, especially to make it really connect with people and to really sort of pull on the emotional strings, not only of children, but also of the adults that take them, or just a random adult like myself who wants to see it. So big win for Coco. Great marks across the board. We're going to keep a track of that one and see how well that multiplier does. It'll play for at least the next 2 months with no problem. So that was number one this weekend. Number two was Justice League. I feel like every time I say Justice League, I have to be so mopey and sad. The DC flagship huge blockbuster from Warner Brothers took in $40.7 million is the current estimate for this 3-day total. That is a 56.6% drop, which, as Deadline notes in their sort of weekend recap, is better than Batman vs Superman, which had a 69% drop in its second weekend, which is horrific. Suicide Squad, similar, 67% drop in its second weekend, also horrific. So Justice League avoided that, but I think that has more to do with the fact that it's Thanksgiving weekend, right? If this was a normal weekend, I could easily see it slipping into the 60s, and maybe even to that mid 60s, upper 60s, that those other two DCEU films got that were also critically panned. So I had a really long preview show for Justice League. I feel like it really deserves a whole episode on its own, so I'm going to do that this week, like I said. But just a brief sort of overview of its performance right now. $171 million is where it sits. That should have been its opening weekend number. Like, there's no way around it. This movie was green-lighted to break $200 million opening weekend. That's the only reason they made it, right? Like, that was the purpose of this film, to rival Marvel's Avengers. Like, that was the purpose of this film. So I don't, I'm already like getting to the big Justice League sort of thing, but like, people tend to sort of ignore context for whatever bias that they have, right? Like, if I'm a DC EU person and I really love DC Comics, I might be biased and say, well, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's going to make $250 million and everyone's going to be happy. Okay, that's not true, right? Like, the context of this movie being made was that it was going to rival the Avengers. It's not doing that. It didn't even make half what the Avengers made. So it is an unmitigated, huge, massive disaster, and it's such a big disaster that I need to talk about it for about an hour this week. Per theater average was for this weekend was $10,000 per theater. I think it's going to have pretty similar drops, probably 50% drop next week. So you're talking in like the low 20s, and there on down until we get to Star Wars, and then I think Justice League is actually going to disappear quite quickly. Terrible performance, but we'll hear more about that later in the week. Number 3 is the little movie that could, Wonder, from Lionsgate, coming at $22.3 million, an unbelievably great 19% drop. 19. Average for a movie is about 50% in its second weekend. This thing dropped 19%. That's that A+ cinema score at work. Like, you don't get a 19% drop if you're a decent or even a really good film. You only get that sort of really sort of gradual decline if the movie is just a masterpiece for audiences and how they feel about it. Critics is a whole nother story. So Wonder, 22.3 million, still on about 3,100 theaters, added about 76 theaters. Per theater average was $7,000 in its second weekend. It already sits at $69,000. What the flying fuck? I have to label this episode explicit. I don't give a shit. That's insane that it's already at 70 million bucks. I don't even know what the production budget on this was. It was a very quiet film. Steven Chbosky, the author of Perks of Being a Wallflower, one of my favorite books. He was the director, so I guess he got into directing. How did I not know that he got into directing? He also directed Perks of Being a Wallflower, the book that he wrote. That's pretty cool. Big win for him. Big win for Lionsgate. The production budget's not listed, but I can't imagine it's going to be over 20-30 million. Even with Julia Roberts, I'm sure she just took scale for this or whatever, because it was kind of a cool project to work on. This one just like came out of the blue. Like it was not on my radar at all. When I started to do the Justice League preview show, I realized there's other movies opening like The Star and Wonder, and I was like, what is this crap? I was wrong to ignore it, and it is, I think, going to be one of the stories of the sort of holiday season. There's something about the film. My mom called me up right after she saw it. She's like, this movie's amazing. So like, it is connecting with people on a very deep level, and they like to tell their people about that. That is like pure fuel for word of mouth, where they feel so compelled by the movie that they want to talk to other people about it. Wonderful performance for Wonder. I think it's going to have, the really interesting thing about Wonder is how low these drops are going to be as we get to the third, fourth weekend. I think that it's going to stick around sub 30, definitely sub 40 drops. Sub 30 drops is a possibility, and it feels like my gut says like that's going to be a possibility, like in the 25% drop range. If it does do that, it's just going to rake in cash all the way through Christmas. Real big win for everybody involved. Wonder was number 3. Number 4 was Thor, coming in at 16.8 million, a great 22% drop in its fourth weekend. It is still in 3,300 theaters. Its per theater average is $5,100. Total take so far for Thor is $277 million bucks. Let's see how it's doing versus the other Thor movies at this point, just to sort of put this in perspective, how good it's doing. So compared to Thor Dark World, Thor Dark World is at 186 now versus Thor Ragnarok, which is at 277. So it's almost $100 million past Dark World. And the Thor Origin original movie was only at 159 at this point in its run. So Thor 3, as I'll call it, is just crushing it on a level that just me think Marvel can't do anything wrong. They become even more and more perfect. It's like you kind of want them to slip up and be like, could you just make a dud for once? I thought Ant-Man was going to be their dud. I was like, this is stupid. No one's going to watch Ant-Man. Who the fuck is Ant-Man? Like, Why is that their summer release? I was super, super critical of that film. It ended up having like a 4x multiplier or something like that. I think it only made 180, but it was still a huge win. Great cinema score too. Even when they sort of, with their minor films, they tend to hit at least a double or a triple. And Thor here is a home run. Like they marketed it perfectly. The quality was there. It's apparently a super fun film. I have not seen it yet. But I think Marvel's just winning. They're winning, and you compare that to the DCU situation, and it's just like, this is what happens when you try to copy other people and sort of imitate their success. Once it reminds me of a story. Someone once asked me, or there was a question on Quora once, which is sort of a kind of a higher end, just open forum, but it's really heavily focused on startups and tech. Somebody asked on Quora, how can I be the next Steve Jobs? And it's such a it's a dumb question, because anybody who knows anything about great people and great inventors and great thinkers is that the reason that they're great is because they did something different. Not because they copied somebody else, not because they imitated somebody else, not because they followed the rules set down before them. And I think like that, to me, that's a really good depiction of the Marvel versus DCU situation right now. Marvel were and Disney, I guess, they were the pioneers of this shared cinematic universe as we know it now. They really were. They went out on a limb. They had this vision in their head, and they made it happen. DC has tried to copy it, and it has been abject failure, right? That's what happens sometimes. And Thor, this is the third Thor movie. It's crushing it. It's going to fly past 300 million, no problem. The third movie of a somewhat minor character, sort of second tier character here. Like they know what they're doing, and they've created almost a whole separate industry within the Hollywood industry for Marvel, and they're in their own world right now, and it's just like they're totally in the zone. So Thor's doing great. Number 5 this weekend was Daddy's Home 2 from Paramount, 13.2 million, 8% drop. Wow, these drops are awesome. It's all the Thanksgiving weekend. Still in 3,500 theaters. Per theater average is $3,800 just about. Total take so far for Daddy's Home 2 is 72.6 million. I wonder if Box Office Mojo has a showdown. They do. So we can take a look at the daily from the first one. Maybe not. It doesn't look like it's working, unfortunately. But the original made 150. This one's probably not going to get there. It was about 9 million off its opening weekend from the original, and this weekend it's off about 15. So it's sitting where it's at right now. It's about 40. Oh no, it's 50 million off of the original. So that 150 mark is nowhere even within sight, which is strange because usually sequels tend to do, I don't know, just in general, they tend to do just a little bit better than the original. We're talking like 10 to 20 to 30% better. This one did not. Is it a failure? Maybe. I'm sure John Lithgow and Mel Gibson were not cheap to put in this movie. It does definitely tell us we're not going to see a Daddy's Home 3 anytime soon. But as far as like financially, it kind of feels like it's going to be a push. I wonder if they have the production budget listed here. It's kind of higher, $70 million production budget. So, yeah, I don't know. It's looking kind of like a push to me, or a small profit. Nothing really to write home about in terms of a great ROI in Daddy's Home 2. I don't think it just didn't pop off like the original. Now these drops are great. But like I always say about the opening weekend, it's like the pebble and the ripples, right? Like whatever that opening weekend is, that's the best the film will ever do, with some very, very few exceptions. That's the best the film will ever do, and everything will be an echo of that original sort of sound, if you will, signal. And if that signal is kind of like not super loud, the echoes are not going to be that loud, right? Like that's essentially how it works at the box office. So it just didn't open high enough. These drops are great and stuff like that, but like it could drop sub 30 for a while, and it's still not going to make up that cash. That's just the way it plays out. So kind of definitely a middling performance for Daddy's Home 2. Number 6 this weekend was Murder on the Orient Express. I always say Orient wrong. I'm such a weirdo. $13 million. I believe it gets the award for lowest drop on a wide release. 5.8% drop. Lost about 200 theaters. Let's see here. Per theater average was above Daddy's Home 2, $4,100 per theater. Total take so far is $74 million. $55 million production budget. This one is kind of like, it's definitely, I think, slightly in the win column. Not a huge win, not a huge breakout, but a good enough performance where I think Fox will be decently happy with it. It certainly didn't flop, but it's not really underperforming. It's just a little bit of smidge above middling performance. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be, had a lower budget than Daddy's Home 2 will end up making more money. So that gives you an idea of the context. Number 7 was The Star from Sony, $6.8 billion. Almost 6.9 to be fair. Lost 30% this weekend, which is higher based on these really low Thanksgiving drops, a little on the higher end. Didn't lose any theaters, still in about 2840 theaters. Per theater average is $2,420. Total take so far for The Star is $22 million on a $20 million production budget. This one, I think Sony's going to kind of, I don't know, it's going to stick around obviously through Christmas, but like there's no real buzz behind this thing. And now with Coco doing so well, I think that's going to take all the kid animation audience. So not a really good performance, and I think definitely more on the loss column for The Star. Number 8 this weekend was A Bad Moms Christmas from SDX. This is the sequel to Bad Moms, which I guess, was that last year that it came out? Was it really last year or the year before? I can't remember. $5 million, a 28% drop, which is okay. Normally it would be amazing, but not for this weekend. It lost 642 theaters. It's still in about 2,300 theaters. Per theater average was $2,100. Total take so far is $59 million. This one is just not getting the legs that it needs. But compare it to the $70 million production budget of Daddy's Home 2, A Bad Moms Christmas was made for $28 million. So STX, I think, knows how to make films a lot cheaper than the traditional studios, and they did that. So maybe that will help them save face. I don't think it has much of an international audience for this. In fact, let's take a look at the breakdown right now and see how it's doing. Foreign's only $33 million. Total take so far worldwide is $92 million. Not a really good performance. It's almost in the flop territory. It kind of feels like just almost there. The original, I think, broke 100 million. I'm almost positive it did domestically. This one won't, obviously. Actually, let's take a look at the head-to-head. I love that Box Office Mojo does this. So at the same period in its release, the original, which was last year, was last July, that the first Bad Moms came out, and it wasn't that bad. It was okay. It wasn't fantastic. I thought it was kind of like blah, whatever. But people connected with it. Total for the original Bad Moms was 113 million. At this point in its run, on its 24th day, it was at 85.6 million. The sequel is only at 59.7. So it's about not 30%, not about 25 million off, right? That's like my basic arithmetic failing me right now. 25 million off the original. It's not going anywhere. I know it's the holidays, so it's gonna have low drops, but like Daddy's Home 2, it's just not gonna be able to make up the cash. It's not gonna happen. Only $8 million more production budget than the original, so they didn't like double it or go to $16 million or something like that. So I think that low budget will help them sort of break even on this. I think it'll break even, and I think it's not going to make much, if any, profit whatsoever. But I don't think it's going to be a big loss for them. So that was A Bad Moms Christmas at number 8. Number 9 this weekend, the Thanksgiving weekend of 2017. Roman J. Israel Esquire from Sony, 4.5 million. It was on limited release. I think last week it added about 1,700 theaters. Its per theater average was an anemic $2,700. Total take so far is $6.2 million. This was a failed expansion. The marketing was not good for this. Actually, I don't know what the quality of the film and what people are saying. It's not good. It seemed like a prestige movie, to be honest with you. Denzel Washington's a huge draw. Everybody loves him. 53% Rotten Tomatoes from about 100 critics. Audience score is not great either at 68. Cinema score is a B. So not a good response from the audiences on this one, which means that this really poor wide release opening or expansion, I should say, is not going well, because now word of mouth is going to spread that it's not very good. This one will disappear from theaters before you know it. I didn't really know that much about this movie. I think I saw the trailer for it. I just didn't have any buzz to it, despite the fact that Denzel was in it. It just did not have any fireworks or hook to it to bring in audiences, and I think that's one of the reasons why this wide release expansion failed pretty poorly here. So that one's not going to last long. An expansion that is going pretty well, at number 10 this weekend, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This is a good transition to our Oscar talk. It's already that season. We're here, folks. It's going to be a sprint all the way to February. I believe the Oscars are in February, aren't they? So this is when it happens. 3 Billboards is, I think, a front runner right now for screenplay, best actress, best actor, and probably will be nominated for best film and best director. It did $4.4 million this weekend, had a big expansion. It is now in about 600 theaters. Per theater average was $7,100 in its third weekend. Not bad at all. Now, I can't really tell if it's gonna sort of really blow up. Right now, a $7,000 per theater average on only 600 screens suggests to me that they're gonna do a slow rollout here and see if they can build momentum in a lot of the places that don't normally get these types of films. It is kind of an art film. I hear it's a mix between like Fargo and True Detective. Did somebody say that to me? That sounds like bullshit. I don't know why I just repeated that ridiculous claim, but that somebody actually told me that. Or maybe like Fargo and like Twin. I don't know. It's kind of dark, but kind of, so it's got the Coen Brothers type feel to it. But it also seems like it has some, it's not just like coal black and it's hard. Like it has some soul to it. And so I think it's playing very well with a lot of people. Let's see what the critics said about it. I know they love this movie. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. 90% audience score. That's really interesting. With about 8,000 ratings. Wow. I think people are going to love this movie. I think its award buzz is going to help carry it over to a successful wide release campaign. Where's it going to end up? I have no idea. Anything over 20, I think, would be a big win for a movie like this. Now, I think they're going to expand it more in this weekend, so we'll see how that per theater average holds up. That is the key barometer here. If you're looking at limited releases, always look at the per theater average, because it'll tell you the real story. And where it's at right now is decent, right? It's not fantastic. It's not terrible. It's not really middling. It's doing really well. But I won't be able to tell how well it's going to do in the long run until it gets about over 1,000 theaters and maybe 2,000 theaters, if it ever does get out to that many theaters. And that's the difference between like $15 million and like 40 and higher, right? Like Big Sick did over $40 million. It started out as a limited art house film and slowly expanded. Now, there's a whole nother context to that, but I'm not going to get into it. If this movie does that, I think it'll be successful and it'll have a good Oscar run. Remember, you really can't win the Oscars unless you do well at the box office or the critics have, like Moonlight's a good example where it only did about 20 something at the box office, but every critic that I knew just gushed over the film passionately. Like it had a lot of advocates in the critic space. And that'll be the tell here, because critics love this movie, but if it can break out of that $20 million barrier and go 30, 40, it's got a good chance winning Best Picture. Speaking of limited releases, in number 11 this week was Lady Bird from A24, sitting at $4 million. expanded into 791 theaters, so very similar run now to Three Billboards. So kind of, even though Lady Bird came out a week before, they're kind of going neck and neck. Per theater average is $5,100. Total take so far is $10,700,000. So not bad at all. Like, this is, I can't tell you the number of people who have told me about this movie in the last 2 weeks. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, you have to see it. Oh, you're gonna love it. People have really enjoyed the film. I have to say, it has 100% Rotten Tomatoes, and that's with 163 reviews. I don't think I've ever seen that before. 163 reviews, and it's got 100%. Average rating is 8.9 out of 10. This is just, there's no other way to put it. Like, this is a bona fide art house smash hit. Smash hit. Audience score is 89%, lower than that 100%, obviously. Not in the 90s, but really darn close. I do have a concern, and I've talked about this film a lot, and I got a lot of buzz from certain types of people. People live in New York, people live in Los Angeles, and like San Francisco. Like, those types of places, people are going to see this movie. Like, it's just like, it's like a cultural meme to them now. If I was still living in New York, I guarantee you I already would have seen it. I probably would see it opening night with a group of friends. Like, that's what you do in cities like that. You go and see art films. Like, that's just what people do. I wouldn't do that in Nashville. I don't think it's here in Nashville yet. It's just different vibe, different world. So that scene, I call it the art house scene, in the big cities, loves it. Now it's expanded out. It's almost about 800 theaters. Its per theater average is starting to slip, right? And I don't know if it's going to be able to make the leap, because when you're sitting at $5,000 on only about 800 theaters, that $5,000 per theater doesn't seem all that fantastic. Wonder, which is in 3,172 screens, its per theater average this weekend was 7,000. Right? Like, it's just, Lady Bird's not doing well enough, I think, to make it over the art house sort of. It's not making it enough to make it across that gap between art house hit and mainstream mass success. And that space can be really, really big. It's the size of the Grand Canyon. Big Sick kind of made it all the way over, but Amazon Studios released it. They gave it like a $25 million marketing budget. So at that point, didn't really feel like a traditional art house word of mouth smash, right? It just didn't feel that way. Like, Amazon helped them a lot on that. So I think the news on Lady Bird is this. I think the performance has been so well in the big cities, and clearly by the money that it has made and by the buzz and that 100% Rotten Tomato score with 163 reviews, it is a lock for some Oscar nominations. I guarantee you Greta Gerwig is going to get, this is her first movie, by the way, directing. I think she might get a Best Director nomination. Will she win? Probably not. It's definitely going to get a screenwriter, I think, nomination for original screenplay. I think she also wrote it. So, and maybe best actress too. I mean, it's possible. But I just don't think it's going to, rack it up into the 40s or $50 million. I think it's going to be a really, really great performance. Everybody who sees it is going to love it, but I think it's going to fall short of sort of making it onto like the top shelf. And I don't mean that artistically, I mean that business wise. And if it doesn't, to me, if it doesn't hit the 30-40 range, it can't win Best Picture. That's just what I'm seeing in my head. I could be totally wrong. I don't think it also has the Best Picture vibe to it. It may actually be one of, if not the best film released this year, just from an artistic perspective. You look at that Rotten Tomato score, like, it has a really strong argument for it so far. But, that's not necessarily going to translate to the Oscars, where a lot of it is about pomp and circumstance. So I don't know if it's going to be able to, I think it's going to get nominated for Best Picture is what I'm saying, but I really doubt it's going to win. But who fuck knows? I mean, Moonlight won last year. Talk about an unbelievable winner. Okay, so Lady Bird did very well. There's so many limited movies coming out these days because of the Oscars. We have a new per theater champion for 2017. I did not think, despite the fact that the buzz in this film was just super, super off the charts. It has been since whenever it played at some festival, and like people had standing ovations. Any critic that saw it, that talked about it, was like, this is the best movie I've seen in years. That movie is Call Me by Your Name. It is now the highest per theater average of any opener. It opened on 4 screens. My guess is New York, Los Angeles, per the usual art house thing. $101,000 per theater. $101,000. It broke that barrier, and I now have to take a look and see where it is at the all-time list because I forgot to look that up. But so this is one of those situations where the buzz that has been going on for months is matched by a performance that is really out of this world. It is almost touching the top 25 best per theater averages of all time. If you kind of remove, there's a couple in here that kind of don't count. Like Toy Story, like a lot of these don't count. Lion King, Pocahontas, I can't even say it. Toy Story 2, A Bug's Life, Hercules, Frozen. Those are all in the top 7. That's stupid because they opened on 1 theater. That's dumb. For the movies that count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's probably like almost top 10, top 15. Just to give you an idea of like where it sits, Inside Llewyn Davis did a very similar per theater average on its first weekend, 101. Blue Jasmine did 102. Moonlight did 100 last year. So it's up there, right? Like, but who knows where it's going to go? You know, Inside Llewyn Davis ended at $13 million total after that amazing record-breaking per theater average and opening. Moonlight ended up at 27. Similar, Midnight in Paris opened at 99, ended its run at 56 million. Birdman opened at 106, ended its run at 42. Who knows where this is going to go? Like this, the buzz on this though feels special. Like it's one of those films where critics almost kind of, I don't want to say they get emotional in their review. Like if you ever watch a lot of movie reviewers, they tend to be pretty cold. They're very dynamic in their performers and stuff like that, but like they tend to have very sort of stoic viewpoints of art. That's because it's their job. They do it every day. They see hundreds of films every year. They can be a little cynical. You know a movie is special when a normal, stoic, cynical movie reviewer almost like tears up when they're talking about a film. And I feel like I've seen that with Call Me by Your Name. Apparently it is just gorgeous. 98% Rotten Tomatoes, average rating 9.2 out of 10. Audience score right now with a small audience is 90%. You know, I think it's just a very sort of, I don't know that much about it, but it is kind of a straightforward love movie. It has a European setting, so it's, you know, a little bit has that exoticness to it, at least for American audiences. You know, I think a guy's in his mid-20s, starts a relationship with a younger man, 17 years old. There's some I want to say, like, not buzz is the right word. There's some controversy with that. Like, this older man, it's a younger boy. I don't know. The dude's 17. I'm not going to get into that stuff. Like, it's just a whole different ballgame. There's a lot of sort of homophobia involved with that, too. Just because it is a story about two men falling in love. But I think people are going to get back past that. I think it's going to do incredibly well. I don't think it's going to play well outside of the major cities, though. I don't see it making more than $20 million tops. But I do think it has a very strong chance of being nominated for a lot of Oscars, writing, directing, acting. And this one feels like it could slip through because it reminds me a lot of Moonlight and how much the insiders and the people in the industry and the reviewers are gushing about it. Like, it does feel that same way that Moonlight did. So I think it actually has a good chance of winning Best Picture. But we'll see how it does in its second weekend. It's already sort of broken records on its first weekend. Just an amazing, amazing opening in New York and Los Angeles for Call Me By Your Name. Okay, so I think that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. Oh, Darkest Hour opened. Focus Features. This is the Gary Oldman, Winston Churchill biopic. Open on 4 screens, 44,000 per theater. That's okay. Not fantastic. He's probably going to win Best Actor for that, I would think. Although I have to check the 86% are on Tomatoes. What's the audience score there? 72% audience score. I hear it's kind of like by the book biopic, but Gary Oldman's absolutely amazing at it, is what I hear. So I think he has a very, very good chance of winning Oscar for Best Actor. Commercially, I don't think there's really a big audience for that film. And the $44K per theater on its opening weekend suggests that even the art house people are like, no, okay, yeah, whatever. Call Me By Your Name more than doubled it, so just keep that in perspective. I think that is mostly what I wanted to talk about today. Let's just take a quick view of what's coming up. Is it even worth doing a preview show this weekend? I don't even know. There's nothing. This is what I'm talking about. Like, why are there 2 weekends coming up where there's no major wide release in December? Fucking December. Like, December is usually one of the biggest months for the box office. I don't know what these people are thinking, to be honest with you. They are really screwing up. And I mean, like, people, I mean, like, the industry. Like, how could you not put out, a major wide release film? It doesn't make any sense. Now, there's a lot of limited stuff coming out. The Disaster Artist comes out on this Friday. Is it already the first this Friday? God damn. Yeah, it is. Fuck. Disaster Artist comes out. That's a limited release. It's not, I mean, it's going to play well in New York, Los Angeles, but like it's going to top out like 10, 12 million bucks total. The Shape of Water. This one I feel has a lot of great buzz. Early reviews are ecstatic about it. It's Guillermo del Toro. He also wrote it. Sally Hawkins plays the lead. Michael Shannon's in it. Richard Jenkins, who's great actor. Nate Senior from 6 Feet Under, that great HBO show. Was he Nate Senior? I guess his name was Nate. I can't remember. Whatever. He was from 6 Feet Under. He was the dad who came back as a ghost. Spoiler alert. It's rated R though. Shape of Water. I thought it was rated PG-13. This one, if I had to guess right now, if someone said, gun to my head, what's going to win Best Picture? My gut says The Shape of Water. I feel like Guillermo del Toro, I haven't seen this movie, but my gut says he's made this masterpiece. Like, this is the buzz that I hear about it, the style of the film, the trailer was whatever. But there's something about it that seems, it's normally his magical realism style, like Pan's Labyrinth. But I feel like this is the year for him. I really do. And I feel like this could be his Best Picture, or maybe he gets Best Director, something like that. But that opens up, I guess, this weekend, maybe limited. It's listed as limited here on Box Office Mojo, so I don't know if that's true or not. So you get that coming out, and a couple other indie things coming out. So nothing massive. The weekend after, you have I, Tonya, which looks fantastic. Margot Robbie's in that. She plays Tonya Harding, obviously. But it's coming out from Neon. Neon's super new distributor. They already have a great track record. They did Ingrid Goes West. But I don't really know. That has no audience outside the major cities, I don't think. Just Getting Started by Broad Green Pictures is going wide. Morgan Freeman, Tommy Lee Jones, Renee Russo. What is this movie? Who's Broad Green Pictures? I know who they are, but I always talk about them like I don't know who they are, but I don't really know who they are. Does anybody know who they are? They put out A Walk in the Woods. That's their biggest movie. It grossed $29 million. So they're not a major player. At least not yet. They're putting out a film on December 8th, and that's really it. And then you got Star Wars coming out on the 15th. We're only 2 weeks away from Star Wars. And then things get a lot more active with Downsizing. I think that's going to do very well. That also might win Best Picture. if it's as good as Alexander Payne's other films. Father Figures, Pitch Perfect 3, yeah, it gets really crowded at the end of the year. The Greatest Showman comes out. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, that's going to be huge. And then a lot of Oscar bait at the end of the year, like Molly's Game and Phantom Thread, which is Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Mescal Anderson. Almost forgot. I was super excited about that, but then I saw the trailer and I was like, no thanks. I have BBC America. If I want to watch something boring, I'll just tune into that on Sunday afternoon. So negative. I'm so negative. Sorry. Anyway, so that's sort of the rundown, guys. Again, I'll work on the audio stuff and try and get it back to what I like. I'm an audio engineer, hobbyist, I would say, not by trade, but it's something I've been doing for a long time. So I really want the audio quality to be as high as possible. Thanks for bearing with me until it gets there. And I will be back. There's not really much to talk about in terms of previews, so I will do a Justice League Postmortem at the midweek. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.